Taliban forces entered the heart of the Afghan capital, Kabul, today, the culmination of a rapid advance and retaking of control almost exactly 2 decades after they were ousted from power. Fighters were filmed inside the presidential palace after Ashraf Ghani, now the former president, fled the country. Afghans and foreign nationals have been trying to get on planes at Kabul airport, where international troops have been involved in evacuations. But security there is reported to be fragile. The latest developments came after the Taliban moved through one Afghan province after another in recent days and headed towards the capital. Our first report is from our diplomatic correspondent, Paul Adams.
Afghanistan has new masters. 20 years after their first experiment in power came to a shattering end, the Taliban are back, hours after arriving in Kabul, sitting at the president's desk. Earlier, at the same desk, President Ashraf Ghani clinging to the last fragments of power. But the man gazing down on Kabul's streets has gone, fleeing to neighbouring Uzbekistan. In a Facebook post, he said he'd left to avoid bloodshed. As the Taliban moves in, the West moves out. American helicopters busy over Kabul all day today, ferrying diplomats from the US Embassy to the airport. This disorderly end was not the plan. Hundreds of British troops have now arrived in Kabul to help with the evacuation of thousands of British and Afghan civilians.
You should be wearing a mask at all times because we don't know where they're all coming from.
The operation is well underway. These troops may not be on the ground for long. Kabul is in chaos. People desperate to leave, taking what they can, fearing a bloody assault. There's little violence so far, but a lot of panic. Crowds descended on banks trying to take out their savings. As police officers and security officials abandoned their positions, the Taliban urged people to stay calm.
We want to avoid bloodshed, to destruction of properties of the people, and to not give chance to plunderers, looters who are waiting for such moments to loot or plunder the properties of the people.
But the streets are full of dread. Tens of thousands of civilians displaced by fighting elsewhere, living out in the open, telling stories of abuses at the hands of the Taliban.
The Taliban came into our village in the night. After a few days, we managed to escape as they were murdering the men and boys. They accused them of being in the army or the police. They were taken out of their homes and murdered because they worked for the government.
Outside the capital, the Taliban are consolidating their grip on Afghanistan's major cities, like Herat, unfazed by their headlong success, which has government ministers reeling.
The saddest part is that I didn't expect this, but now I might face consequences that I never even dreamed of. And I guess that's the price that we pay for trying to make this world a little better.
At the border with Pakistan, Afghans are leaving. With or without fighting, the Taliban's takeover looks set to trigger yet another wave of refugees. Tonight at Kabul airport, military and civilian planes offer the only way out. At the gates, chaotic scenes. Who will leave and who will be left behind? Is this how the West's 20-year adventure in Afghanistan will be remembered? Paul Adams, BBC News.
Let's go live now to Kabul and the BBC's Malik Mudassar, who is there. What can you tell us, Malik, about the extent of the Taliban presence in the city?
Yes, as Talibans have taken all of the Afghanistan almost. Now they are in Kabul city, and I could just see them from here that they are patrolling in the streets, and they are just keeping those government official vehicles and army and police vehicles they have captured from the forces here in Afghanistan. They are patrolling here, and they are just marking those places to where to put checkpoints and where to get the advantage point from.
And what is the effect of that, would you say, on the people of the city?
Well, that is very catastrophic. As soon as I landed this morning here in Kabul, the atmosphere of the city was entirely different. And there was a huge traffic jam in the Kabul city from the airport towards the outskirts of the Kabul city. And I could see the families, kids, females, everyone with their belongings in the car. And they were trying to get out of the city. And they were just look depressed, devastated and defeated.
Malik Mudassar in Kabul, thank you very much. Well, here the Prime Minister chaired an emergency COBRA meeting this afternoon and Parliament is being recalled to discuss the situation. Boris Johnson said the immediate priority is to evacuate British citizens and Afghans who have been working with the UK. Here's our political correspondent Ben Wright.
For 20 years, the UK has committed its military, money and lives to Afghanistan. Some of the fiercest fighting was here in Helmand. The effort ends with a frantic scramble to get out.
The situation in Afghanistan continues to be extremely difficult, getting more difficult, I would say. And our priority is to make sure that we deliver on our obligations to UK nationals in Afghanistan, to all those who have helped the British effort in Afghanistan over 20 years, and to get them out as fast as we can.
UK troops first went to Afghanistan in October 2001 after the 9/11 attacks, joining US-led action against Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. By the time combat operations ended in 2014, 454 UK soldiers and military personnel had died. Successive prime ministers stressed their commitment to the country and protecting the progress made. Today, cross-party fear that progress could vanish.
The real danger is that we're going to see every female MP murdered. We're going to see ministers strung up on street lamps. And this is the decision that I'm afraid has been taken. We haven't heard from the Foreign Secretary in about a week, despite this being the biggest single foreign policy department disaster, since Suez.
It's been a catastrophic miscalculation. That is absolutely clear. The UK and the United States both overestimated the capacity of the Afghan government to hold off the Taliban and underestimated the capacity of the Taliban to advance throughout the country. And that has been clear actually for days.
The UK says its mission in Afghanistan had to end once the US announced its decision to leave, despite the consequences. It's a mark of the crisis that MPs and peers will be brought back from their summer break on Wednesday for a day's debate. Many are livid about the way Afghanistan is being left. But talking here won't stop the Taliban, and all MPs can do is ask ministers how a humanitarian and security disaster might be avoided. For James Kyle, today is difficult. He was a captain in the Light Dragoons, served in Afghanistan in 2007 and 2009, the year the regiment lost 6 of its soldiers.
It's incredibly sad to see the change happen so quickly after years and years of incredibly hard work from remarkable armed services in the country. I don't know how I could ever look the parents of fallen soldiers in the eye and say that what they did was worth it.
The situation in Afghanistan will be deeply felt by many families closer to home, reflecting on a mission that wasn't meant to end like this.
And Ben is here with me in the studio now. It was striking to hear the way the Prime Minister acknowledged and accepted, really, that this change is happening, that a new government is going to be formed.
It was a blunt acceptance of the facts on the ground. And Boris Johnson said he wanted to see like-minded nations now work together to not prematurely recognise any new regime in Kabul without agreement. He also said the UK was determined to prevent Afghanistan not again becoming a breeding ground for terror. But I think the rhetoric jars with the reality, because this is in many ways out of their hands. Tonight in Kabul, British officials are scrambling to get UK nationals onto charter flights and onto military planes. Boris Johnson said the government would do everything it could to honour its obligations to Afghans who had helped the UK government in Afghanistan and would try and get as many people out as they could. It's clear the Taliban's advance caught the government by surprise. Dominic Raab only came back from holiday today, for instance, a decision that Labour said was shameful. MPs are going to meet on Wednesday. They will ask how we got here, where we go next, but I think it will feel rather late.
Ben Wright, thank you very much. Well, for the United States, the lowering of its flag and the closure of its embassy in Kabul marked the end of a phase that began almost exactly 2 decades ago in the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks. Our North America editor John Sopel has been looking back on that period and on what these events mean for the Biden administration.
Over many years and at a cost of tens of billions of dollars, the US trained and equipped Afghan forces to be ready to take back control of their country. But they collapsed like a house of cards, one of many miscalculations made by the Biden administration over these dizzying few weeks. And today, America's most senior diplomat was trying to put a brave face on events.
What we're focused on now is making sure that we can get our people to a safe and secure place, that we can do right by the people who stood with us in Afghanistan all these years, including Afghans who worked for the embassy, worked for our military. We have a massive effort underway to bring Afghans at risk out of the country if that's what they so desire.
America's attempt to export liberal democracy to Afghanistan is well and truly over. America's effort to build a civil society in Kabul and beyond also in tatters. And Joe Biden's prediction from 5 weeks ago that everything would be just fine has not worn well.
Well, first of all, the mission hasn't failed yet. So the question now is, where do they go from here? That the jury is still out. But the likelihood there's going to be the Taliban overrunning everything and owning the whole country is highly unlikely.
The Taliban wants to make a deal.
The withdrawal policy was framed during the Trump administration and embraced by Joe Biden, who's at Camp David and today was being briefed by his officials. He believes passionately that America can't stay in Afghanistan indefinitely. But foreign policy hawks are rounding on both men.
What we're watching right now in Afghanistan is what happens when America withdraws from the world. So everybody who has been saying America needs to withdraw, America needs to retreat, we are getting a devastating, catastrophic, real-time lesson in what that means.
U.S. Embassy helicopters flew from roof to roof.
America's most scarring military defeat was summed up in the images of the last helicopter flying off the roof of the U.S. Embassy in Saigon at the end of the Vietnam War. Today's scramble to get out of Kabul may not be that, but it's not far short.
And John's live at the White House now. Where does today then leave the Biden administration reputationally, particularly on foreign policy, John?
Yeah, well, not heightened, and the few hundred Afghans who've gathered here are furious at what has unfolded in these dizzying few days. I think you've got to distinguish between the policy and the implementation. The policy of America saying, look, we can't stay forever, we will need to pull out, Afghan needs to take charge of its own affairs, I think that enjoys widespread support. But the implementation, the miscalculations, the warnings ignored are something else altogether. There are talks going on with the Taliban and US officials, and the Taliban have ridden roughshod over them. So what leverage does that leave the Americans in future going forward? Joe Biden hasn't spoken yet. He's going to have to address the country. This may have been Donald Trump's policy, but it's Joe Biden's implementation. And I think he'll pay quite a price for the shambles that has unfolded over the past few days.
John Sopel in Washington, thank you.